When it comes to cases of true crime, there are many horrific stories that leave us astounded by the dark shadows that can exist in the human psyche. Today, we delve into cases where the unimaginable becomes a chilling reality. Events where the boundaries of humanity are not just crossed, but devoured. Welcome to Cannibal Chronicles, 3 of the darkest appetites in true crime. As we begin today's journey through 3 twisted cases of true crime, we reach our first stop, Issei Sagawa, one that is sure to send shivers down your spine. His sickening story is a gruesome look into the mind of a man driven by an insatiable obsession, a tale that will forever linger in the darkest corners of our nightmares. Let's get into it. Issei Sagawa, a name that would become synonymous with unspeakable horror, was born into a privileged family on June 11, 1949, in Kobe, Japan. Despite his wealthy background, Sagawa's life would take a sinister turn, one that would lead him down a path of unimaginable darkness. As we delve into the depths of his twisted psyche, we must understand the man behind the heinous crimes. What we find is a man who believed himself to be weak, ugly, and small. His obsession with the idea of a perfect woman, tall with occidental features, would become the driving force behind his descent into madness. While studying for a degree in English literature at Waco University in Tokyo, Sagawa's fantasies grew beyond the realm of imagination. He fixated on a German woman teaching him the language, wondering if he could do the unthinkable, consume her. One fateful summer day, he couldn't resist the urge any longer. Sagawa, just under 5 feet tall with small hands and feet, crawled through her window while she slept. He searched for a weapon, spotting an umbrella, intending to knock her out or stab her. But she awoke and screamed, sending him fleeing from her apartment. However, this failed attempt only fueled his insatiable obsession. He meticulously planned his next move, seeking a victim who would not escape. It wasn't until he traveled to Paris a few years later that he found the woman who would haunt his every thought, Renee Hartevelt. Renee was 25, blonde, and fiercely independent. She spoke multiple languages and aspired to earn a PhD in French literature. Sagawa, now a master of deception and manipulation, approached her, asking her to teach him German. Her intelligence and their discussions on art, literature, and culture captivated him. He even wrote her love letters and took her to concerts and exhibits, all while concealing his twisted desires. Despite his small stature and limp demeanor, Renee invited him into her life, unknowingly drawing closer to her demise. Their friendship took an ominous turn when Sagawa invited her to his apartment for dinner, under the pretense of recording her reading a poem. Little did she know, this evening would seal her tragic fate. Sagawa had prepared himself for this moment, acquiring a .22 caliber rifle prior to her visit. As they sat on the floor, Japanese style, drinking tea, he slipped whiskey into her drink to make her more pliant. When he professed his love and desire toward her, she resisted, wanting only friendship. Sagawa nodded in apparent understanding. He handed her the poem to read, started the recorder, and then, in a gruesome twist, shot her in the back of the neck. As she fell, he continued talking to her, but she failed to respond. He was surprised by the eerie silence that filled the room, punctuated only by the flow of blood from her wound. Sagawa later said he fainted after the shock of shooting her, but awoke with the realization that he had to carry out his dark desire to eat her. What followed was a descent into the depths of madness. Sagawa undressed her lifeless body, his foul desires growing with each passing moment. He consumed parts of her flesh, finally fulfilling his grotesque fantasy. The taste, texture, The sensation of devouring another human being, the experience sent shivers down his spine. With a manic fervor, he used an electric carving knife to dismember Renee's corpse, storing strips of her flesh for later. He indulged in the macabre, photographing the mutilated remains, assaulting her lifeless body, and professing his love to it. As he cooked and devoured more of her remains, he listened to the recording of her reading the poem they had shared before her life was brutally stolen. With each passing moment, he reveled in his grotesque feast, his obsession that spiraled out of control. Sagawa's madness knew no bounds. He experimented with various body parts, consumed them with a perverse relish, and took pleasure in the revolting act. His apartment transformed into a chamber of horrors, the evidence of his unspeakable crime concealed within its walls. The next day, as the body showed no signs of decay, Sagawa continued his horrifying feast. He explored the innermost recesses of Renee's remains, from her underarm to her elbow, tasting each part with a sick fascination. He chewed on her nose, savoring the crunch of cartilage. Sometime later, flies had begun to swarm around the corpse, a sign that his grotesque feast was coming to an end. He used a hatchet to dismember her further, even resorting to using her severed hand for self-gratification. He took what remained of Renee's body, including her head, which he hung in front of him like a trophy, a chilling testament to his gruesome act. It was at this moment that he realized the extent of his depravity. "I realized I am a cannibal," he later acknowledged. As the clock struck midnight on the second day, Sagawa decided it was time to dispose of the evidence. He called a cab and transported 2 suitcases containing Renee's remains to a nearby park, intending to dump them into the water. However, he had a difficult time with his heavy burden, and when he spotted some people watching him, he got scared and abandoned the suitcases. A couple that had seen him with the bags called the police, who opened the suitcase, discovered the remains, and began the task of tracing the bags back to the owner. Back in his apartment, Sagawa continued to consume the pieces he had refrigerated, later claiming that they grew sweeter with time. When the police arrived at Issei Sagawa's apartment 2 days after the murder with a search warrant, they had little idea of the horrors that awaited them within those walls. As they entered the residence, they were met with an eerie stillness, a silence that seemed to hang heavy in the air. Sagawa, however, showed no resistance. He calmly let them in, fully aware that his grotesque secret was about to be exposed. The officers began their search, meticulously scouring the apartment for evidence of the heinous crime that had been committed. Their journey into the heart of darkness began with the refrigerator. As they opened its door, a putrid and nauseating stench wafted out, assaulting their senses. Inside, they discovered pieces of a female body, a macabre collection of flesh that once belonged to a living, breathing human being. Among the gruesome remains were the lips of the victim. Issei Sagawa did not attempt to hide or deny his actions. Instead, he freely confessed to the horrors that had transpired within those walls. His descriptions were shockingly detailed and salacious, painting a picture of a man who had descended into madness, utterly detached from the bounds of human morality. The details of the crime were so grotesque, so horrifying, that it became clear Sagawa was not in his right mind. A judge, faced with the chilling testimony and evidence, determined that he was not competent to stand trial. His delusions and psychosis were apparent, and it was evident that he posed a danger to society. As a result, Issei Sagawa received a sentence of incarceration for an indefinite period in a French insane asylum. 3 psychiatrists who evaluated him all reached the same grim conclusion: he would never be cured. However, it became clear that Sagawa's wealth and connections would not keep him confined for long. In 1984, his father, Akira Sagawa, president of Kurita Water Industries in Tokyo, arranged for his transfer to the Matsuzawa Psychiatric Hospital in Japan. The superintendent at Matsuzawa believed that he was sane and should be in prison, but Issei Sagawa's fate would once again be shaped by his privilege. Sagawa remained at Matsuzawa for a shockingly brief period, just 15 months, before he was granted his freedom in August of 1986. His release was, once again, thanks to his father's influence and against the advice of the hospital superintendent. After taking the life of another human being and consuming her remains, Sagawa was able to walk freely in society just 5 years after the gruesome crime. As we conclude this chapter of the Cannibal Chronicles, we're left with a chilling understanding of the darkness that can consume a person's soul. Sagawa's story challenges our very notions of morality and sanity, leaving us with a sense of unease that lingers long after his tale has been told. But our journey through the darkest appetites in true crime is far from over. As we move forward, we delve into another harrowing case, revealing the unsettling depths of the human capacity for evil. Stay with us as we uncover the next chilling chapter in the Cannibal Chronicles. Our second stop on this twisted journey through cases of true crime brings us to Vince Lee. In the summer of 2008, a Greyhound bus rumbled along the Trans-Canada Highway, cutting through the heart of the vast Canadian prairies. It was a seemingly ordinary evening, the bus bound for Winnipeg, Manitoba, carrying a motley crew of passengers, each with their own destination in mind. Among them was Tim McLean, a 22-year-old carnival worker. He had just completed a stint at a fair in Alberta and was on his way home to Winnipeg. As the bus pulled away from Edmonton where he had boarded, Tim settled into his seat at the rear of the bus, one row ahead of the washroom. He put in his headphones, filling his ears with music, and leaned against the window, preparing for the long journey ahead. Little did Tim know that this night would mark the beginning of a horrifying tragedy. Hours passed uneventfully as the bus made its way through the sprawling Canadian landscape. At around 6:55 p.m., the bus stopped in Erickson, Manitoba to take on a new passenger. His name was Vincent Weiwes Lee, a 40-year-old man with a shaved head and sunglasses, a mysterious figure among the travelers. Initially, Lee occupied a seat near the front of the bus. However, as the journey continued, he moved closer to Tim, eventually choosing the seat right next to him. Tim McLean, deeply engrossed in his music and seemingly unaware of Lee's presence, barely acknowledged the stranger who had taken the seat beside him. As the bus continued on its route, the sun began to set, casting an eerie twilight over the highway. The passengers settled into their routines, some dozing off, others gazing out of the windows into the darkening landscape. Then, in the shadowy confines of the bus, the tranquility shattered. Tim McLean was sleeping soundly with his headphones on when, suddenly, the man beside him, Vince Lee, produced a large knife. In a horrifying blur, Lee began to stab Tim repeatedly in the neck and chest. The passengers, awakened by a blood-curdling scream, watched in disbelief as this nightmarish scene unfolded. Tim McLean, trapped against the window, fought desperately for his life, but the relentless attack left him with little chance to escape. Witnesses recounted the brutal, frenzied assault, their horror growing with each passing moment. But that wasn't enough for Vince Lee. In an act of unimaginable horror, he decapitated Tim McLean, and, in a grotesque display of inhumanity, held up the severed head for the other passengers to witness. Panic erupted as horrified passengers fled the bus, seeking refuge from this grotesque and senseless violence. The bus driver, along with 2 courageous passengers, attempted to intervene, but Lee, gripped by madness, chased them away, slashing wildly at them within the locked bus doors. With a heartless calm, Lee returned to the body of Tim McLean and began to dismember it, consuming McLean's flesh in a gruesome act of cannibalism. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police received a chilling report of a stabbing on a Greyhound bus west of Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. What they found when they arrived was a scene of unimaginable horror. The suspect, Vince Lee, was still on board, prevented from escaping by the bus driver and a truck driver who had provided makeshift weapons. The other passengers, in shock and terror, were huddled at the roadside, some of them crying and vomiting. The situation had spiraled into a standoff as the police attempted to negotiate with the deranged killer. Vince Lee, pacing back and forth inside the immobilized bus, continued to defile the lifeless body of Tim McLean. Police officers witnessed the unthinkable as Lee continued to eat parts of McLean's body. While the standoff unfolded, the traumatized passengers were transported from the scene to be interviewed at the Brandon RCMP detachment. Throughout the ordeal, Vince Lee muttered disturbing statements, including, "I have to stay on this bus forever," further revealing the depth of his disturbed state of mind. In the early hours of July 31st, 2008, Vince Lee attempted to escape from the bus by breaking through a window. The RCMP swiftly arrested him, tasering him twice for their own safety. Parts of Tim McLean's dismembered body, placed in plastic bags, were recovered from the bus. However, his eyes and a part of his heart were never found, presumed to have been consumed by the accused. As the day broke, the passengers were finally reunited with family members and friends, forever haunted by the horrors they had witnessed on that fateful night. The passengers' lives had been forever scarred by a journey that had turned into a nightmarish descent into madness, and the world watched in disbelief as the details of this horrifying bus ride came to light. Following his arrest, Lee was found to have been suffering from untreated schizophrenia when he stabbed, beheaded, and partially cannibalized Tim McLean. Lee was found not criminally responsible in 2009 and spent 7 years in treatment at a mental health center before being allowed to move to Winnipeg, where he was treated at Health Sciences Center. According to a 1999 ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada, a review board must order an absolute discharge if a person doesn't pose a significant threat to public safety. The review board said it heard testimony from mental health professionals before concluding that the weight of evidence showed Lee is not a risk to the public. The Manitoba Criminal Code Review Board ordered a complete discharge, saying Lee does not pose a significant safety threat. As we conclude the horrifying account of Vince Lee's nightmarish bus ride, we are reminded of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. But our journey through the Cannibal Chronicles is far from over. Brace yourselves as we dive into the third stop on our journey and today's final chapter, a tale of terror that unfolds in the heart of another continent. Prepare to be chilled to your core as we unravel the story of Armin Meiwes, a man whose insatiable cravings knew no bounds. Armin Meiwes, born in December 1961 in Rothenburg, Germany, appeared to be an ordinary man leading an unremarkable life, but beneath his seemingly average exterior lurked an appetite for the macabre that would soon shock the world. Meiwes' descent into depravity began in the early 2000s when he discovered a website dedicated to extreme desires. It was there that he stumbled upon a post that would forever change the course of his life. A post from a man seeking a willing participant in his own murder and consumption. The two men, Meiwes and his victim-to-be, Bernd Jürgen Brandis, connected through this disturbing forum. What followed was a series of chilling online conversations that detailed their gruesome plan. Meiwes, fueled by his darkest desires, agreed to fulfill Brandis' horrifying requests. On March 9, 2001, the men met at Meiwes' secluded farmhouse in Rothenburg. The evening began with a sinister agreement. Brandis, fully aware of the horrors that awaited him, would willingly become Meiwes' victim. Meiwes documented the entire event on video, creating a macabre record of their twisted encounter. Brandis, in a shocking display of determination, voluntarily consumed sleeping pills and alcohol to numb his senses, preparing himself for the unthinkable. Meiwes then proceeded to amputate Brandis's genitals at his request, an act of self-mutilation that was both horrifying and inexplicable. The two men then proceeded to eat his now detached genitals. This gruesome act was a precursor to the unimaginable horrors that would follow. Brandis, now weakened and mutilated, lay on Meiwes' kitchen table, fully aware that he had placed himself in the hands of a cannibalistic predator. Meiwes, with a cold and calculated demeanor, proceeded to end Brandis' life, an act that was captured in disturbing detail on a video recording which was never released to the public. But Meiwes' descent into madness did not end with the murder. Instead, he embarked on a gruesome journey to consume Brandis' remains. Over the course of several months, he stored and meticulously prepared portions of Brandis' body, indulging in the most macabre of feasts. The details of this horrifying crime shocked the world when they came to light. Meiwes, in a chilling confession, revealed that the taste of human flesh had been a lifelong obsession, and he had finally acted upon it. The video recording, along with the physical evidence, left no doubt about the depravity of his actions. In December 2003, Armin Meiwes was arrested and charged with the murder and consumption of burned Jürgen Brandis. The trial that followed was a chilling spectacle, as the world grappled with the gruesome details of this real-life horror story. Ultimately, Meiwes was convicted of manslaughter due to Brandis' willing participation rather than murder. He received an 8.5-year prison sentence. However, in a shocking turn of events, the German federal court overturned the verdict in 2004, citing a legal error. Meiwes was retried and subsequently found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains to this day. The case of Armin Meiwes challenges our understanding of the darkest corners of the human psyche. It serves as a stark reminder of the depths to which a person's cravings can lead them, and the unfathomable horrors that can unfold behind closed doors. As we conclude this chapter of the Cannibal Chronicles, we are left with a haunting understanding of the human capacity for evil. These stories, though chilling and disturbing, serve as cautionary tales that remind us of the darkness that can lurk within even the most seemingly ordinary individuals. But our journey through the darkest appetites in true crime is not over. There are countless more stories that will send shivers down your spine, stories that delve even deeper into the abyss of human depravity. To continue exploring these chilling tales with us, to uncover more mysteries, and to gain a deeper understanding of the human capacity for evil, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and join us on our next journey into the heart of darkness. Thank you for joining us today in Cannibal Chronicles, 3 of the darkest appetites in true crime. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon to turn on notifications, and come back for more bone-chilling content that will leave you questioning the very nature of humanity. Leave a comment below letting me know if you enjoyed this video, and maybe I'll turn it into a series covering more cannibal stories. Anyway, that's all for today. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.